Thank you so much. Really appreciate that introduction. Hello, everyone. Hello. How's everyone doing? How's your conference been so far? Awesome, great. We had a wonderful conversation this morning with Michelle Mercer. She teed everything up for us, and then you had 2 or 3 actually great breakout sessions. I was able to attend 2 of those and caught the tail end of the last one. My job is a hard job because what I have to do now is everybody is on bases. All the bases are loaded. I got to come up here and hit the ball. If I don't hit a home run, I got to hit it out so everybody can get home, right? So that's my job. I'm gonna take off my shoes for a second. My feet hurt. If y'all could see, like some of you back, I don't know if all the way up there, can you see? So I took my shoes off because my feet hurt oftentimes, but I also took them off because I got on some cool socks. I do. I have on some cool socks, and I need to show off my socks. These shoes, these are what I call the pandemic shoes. Now, for men that speak a lot, we usually speak in those shoes with the heels. When you're up here speaking with heels, and I'm not going to assume, but for the ladies in the room that wear heels, and if you do speak a lot, do your feet hurt if you speak in heels? Yes, because I'm not going to assume anything. Well, my feet hurt a lot when I speak with the little heel, so therefore I went to these pandemic shoes, which are pretty fashionable. I love them. And these are pretty comfortable. I actually could stand up here all day without taking them off, but I had to show off my socks, and my wife tells me all the time, she says, boy, you walk out of the house looking like a rainbow. How do you match up your clothes? I said, look, my style is my style, right? As a matter of fact, tell me, this sister right here, tell me your name again. Tell me your name. Kirsten. Kirsten has on some beautiful, wonderful Chucks, look like some Chuck Taylors. Colorful, beautiful. I would love to put them on, but the Chucks, they really hurt my feet because they have no soles in them at all, right? So you wear those Chuck Taylors, they hurt. So I'm like, look, I worked in higher education for most of my career, and I wore the uniform. Black business suit, navy business suit, white shirt with the tie, everything looking like the coordinated with the university colors. When I said I was able to kind of walk out on my own and do my own thing, I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something different. Sometimes I wear the uniform, but I have my socks just as a way so I can show up authentically me, right? It's going to be something that I'm going to walk into that room with that's going to be different than everybody else. And my wife's like, she said, you wearing that red jacket? So I sure am. I got that. That's right. You got your white pants. I did, but I didn't put the white pants on because it's after Labor Day. But I had the pants in the bag. I'm on Pinterest all the time looking at the styles. It's like, yeah, this is it right here. And I said, I got a lot of compliments on this jacket, so stop tripping about being my wardrobe. I am glad to be here with you all today. I have a couple of words to share with you, a couple of thoughts to share with you as we go throughout our time today. I want it to be a conversation. I know we have some time after, like 15 minutes or so, but as I'm talking, if something comes up, write it down, and if it's just burning, stop me, raise your hand, and I'll try to take that question in the context of the conversation, all right, as I'm speaking, okay? So that's what we want to do. But I want to kind of start off, first of all, what we're going to do, the title, and I have some slides here. I'm not going to go through all the slides. I'm going to probably fast forward through some of the slides. So this won't be slide intensive, but I do have some slides that will help us center ourselves. But I want to kind of first center our thinking today and our interrogation of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging with kind of the conference theme, which is where do we begin when we're creating a culture of belonging? So if you write that down for yourself, if you're taking notes, where do we begin when we're creating a culture of belonging? That's how I want to center ourselves with that as our title. And let me share with you this just big picture thought, this poem rather. Life is like a book. Some chapters sad, some happy, some exciting. But if you never turn the page, you will never learn what the next chapter holds. As we're thinking about creating a culture of belonging, and where do we start? One of the first things we got to do is we got to get in there and start to read and begin to turn pages and go to the next chapters, right? So this next chapter, as we think about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, this next chapter, in my mind, centers around this whole notion of some big picture ideas. I want to give you 10 takeaways. If you don't remember anything else I say to you today, these are the takeaways. You should remember the guy in the red jacket. You should remember the guy with the Kermit the Frog socks on. And you should also remember these 10 takeaways of nothing else I share today. First, we have to understand that belonging is the outcome. Belonging is the outcome. The shift, there's been a change. There's been a change from when we first started about diversity. We first started talking about diversity, right? Then equity and inclusion and belonging. But belonging is the outcome that we're trying to achieve. Secondly, belonging is for everyone, and it is everyone's responsibility. That's the second thing. Belonging is for everyone, and it is everyone's responsibility. Third, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, DEIB, should be embedded in the organization like the budget. It is that important, it is that substantial, that it should be embedded within your organization like the budget. The budget shows up in every meeting. Even when a budget is not on the agenda, the budget is on the agenda, right? Well, DEIB needs to be the same way. It's that important. You cannot train the problem away. Oftentimes, we go to training. There's an issue that happens, let's train it. There's a new philosophy, let's train for it. We want to look at accountability, let's train for it. You cannot train the problem away. As a matter of fact, you need data to inform your training decisions. Michelle talked about data earlier today. If we're going to train, we need data to inform our decisions. We need the data before we go to training. So there's a sequence that happens. Oftentimes we want to go to training first. I have my grandchildren with me for a couple of. Do I look like I got grandchildren? Thank you all. Woo, thank you so much. My goodness, yes. I have my grandchildren with me. I have four total. 3 of the 4 were with me for about a month or so. And the 3 9-month-old, a 3-year-old, and a 4-year-old. And I'm 51. And we have a blended family, and I have a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, 15-year-old and a 14-year-old, and a 21-year-old in the house. So now we're mixing generations. And I'm like, I got to go through these 3 generations because I got to deal with a 9-month-old and a 14-year-old and a 21-year-old. That your mind is just, I don't know if y'all had to deal with that, but at 51, I've already raised the two oldest ones. And so now I'm like, oh my God. So at any rate, the 9-month-old, she's rocking and beginning to crawl. She can't walk yet. She's crawling. When we think about sequencing, we want to go to training before we get the data. We got to crawl first. Then we can walk. We got to know what the problems are first. Then we can go do the training. I'm not saying we don't need training. I'm saying we cannot start with training. All right. And check this out. Training without application and accountability is a waste of money. And we talked about accountability in one of the sessions. Michelle talked about accountability. Understand this. When we go to training, without application and without accountability, we're wasting money. I'm an entrepreneur. As a matter of fact, I'm one of you. I'm a small business owner. If you want to call me in to train, I'll come in. But if we don't have any application or accountability, two things will happen. First, don't blame me if your needle didn't move. Secondly, I will gladly take your money. Easy job for me. But I'm really about helping you move your needle. And so understand this, if you hire somebody to train, and if you don't have any application or accountability measures behind it, you have just wasted money. Okay? And the reason you've wasted money is because the organizational culture is the culprit. So when we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, or if you're talking about justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, DEI, or if you're talking about inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, IDEA, however you want to break it up and look at it, your organizational culture is the culprit. So therefore, we're talking about a change management strategy. So when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're really talking about change management from a diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging lens. We're talking about changing and shifting the organization culture so that the new innovation that we bring into that culture can change. And I have a slide that will kind of break that up for you. The leader is the keeper of the culture and the message. Not the leader just at the top, but everybody in the organization is a leader. We need to flip that paradigm. If my job is the custodian, I am the chief executive custodian. That's my job. And that message needs to be moved all the way down to that person. No, this right here, this is you. You lead this. So that means the culture, the messages, and the builders of the culture is within everybody in the organization. Everybody's a leader within that context. Check this out. Your commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging will be tested behind closed doors. Your commitment is not your statements. Y'all got some great statements. I read them. 2020, everybody came over with these wonderful statements. Oh my God, anti-racism this. We believe in this. These are our core values. But the reality is, when it's time to make those hard decisions, your core values don't show up. And you've made the same decisions that you've made time and time again. So when we want to talk about our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, it happens not in the public, but it happens behind closed doors. Allyship is bestowed and not claimed. We just left the session talking about allyship. Understand this. I don't walk around saying I'm an ally. Somebody in my life has to tell me I am their ally. And I may not be the ally to everybody. So I cannot claim the title ally. I got to show up in somebody's life in such a way to where they say, Will, you were my ally. Will, you were there with me. Will, you stood up for me. So allyship is not claimed, it is bestowed. So those are the 10 takeaways that I want to talk with you about today. And if nothing else, you will have that if you get nothing else from me today. I want to jump a couple slides because we did all this stuff earlier with Michelle. First, let's go this. Let's do this. You all talked about what's the return on investment earlier, okay? So these couple slides will help us to understand that what we're talking about is not squishy. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is not that squishy stuff. Oh my God, we don't talk about that squishy stuff. No, this is real stuff. Let me ask you a couple of questions. Think about a time, y'all can just blurt this out. Think about a time When in an organization, your organization, somebody else's organization, a team that you played on, think about a time where you felt like you belonged. How did you feel? How did you feel? Come on. Good. Felt good. Come on. Safe. Excited. Say again. Relaxed. Connected. Say again. Steam. Seen. When I feel like I belong, I feel seen. Somebody else. Heard. When I feel like I belong, I feel seen and heard. I feel connected. I feel excited. I feel good. Comfortable. When I feel like I belong. Yes. When I feel like I belong, I actually want to be there. Y'all check this out now. I said, what did I say? I said belonging is the outcome. Did I say that? When I feel like I belong, I want to be there. I feel connected. I feel heard. I feel seen. When I feel like I belong. Now let's flip that coin on the other side. When you feel like you don't belong, how do you feel? What's the feeling? That I don't matter. When I feel like I don't belong, I feel like I don't matter. What else? Say again. Not valued. Can't wait to leave. Don't care. Ooh, don't care. Gallup poll 2013, they did a poll of workers all across the United States, small and large companies, and what they found is that 70% of the employees surveyed were disengaged, unhappy with their organizations. 70%, it's 2013, so yes, it's old data. I haven't found anything that's new that changes that data, so I'm still gonna stick with this data right here. And to one of y'all, tell me something otherwise. Because this is what I believe. I believe that everything we need is in the room. My job is not to pour into you, my job is to draw out of you. So everything that we need is in the room. 30% of employees are engaged. Let's look at this for a second. Talking about the squishiness of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Looking at the ROI. Unhappy workers in the U.S. cost U.S. companies, your companies, $450 to $550 billion. Is that squishy? Huh? Y'all talk about, oh, this is squishy stuff. That ain't squishy, that's real, those are real dollars. Because somebody said I'm unhappy and I'm unmotivated. So guess what? When I'm unhappy and I'm unmotivated, I'm still gonna come to work. And when I still come to work, guess what? I'm not gonna do much of anything but the bare minimum, therefore I'm disengaged. So you still paying me to be disengaged, right? So when we're talking about change management, that's what this is all about. It's not about, oh, we gonna, oh, this old squishy stuff, let's put that to the side. I don't know about you, but I don't know. That's some real money. When you lose employees, there's a potential for you to lose 100 to 300% of dollars in terms of their base salary when you have to replace them. Not only do you lose the money in terms of replacing them, but what else do you lose? You lose their institutional capacity, their knowledge, the history that they had. There's a lot that you lose when you lose. And natural attrition is good. So I'm not saying that. But when we lose employees because we don't have an organizational culture that is set up to harness the full potential of people, then we're really missing an opportunity there, all right? So let's look at this thing. Engaged employees, they perform 20% higher than those who are not engaged. There's 31% higher productivity. And those who are sales, there's 37% higher sales. And there's three times the creativity when employees are engaged. So when people say, oh, this is squishy stuff, this is the data that refutes that. When you talk about the return on investment, this is the data that gives you that return on investment when we're talking about creating a culture of belonging within our organizations. If we're not happy We're sick more. We call in more. We have more accidents when we're not engaged in the organization. So there are health implications there when we're not engaged as well. Deloitte says that in their research, and this is more recent, this data here. I want to drop down to this U.S. company spend $8 billion on diversity, equity, inclusion training. U.S. companies. But again, the needle's not moving because why? People don't feel included. They don't feel like they belong. Now, you always say, okay, Will, good, you done gave us all this data, but kind of bring it home. What's this about? How do we make people feel like they belong? Let's look at this thing. Organizational culture. What is organizational culture? Can somebody tell me what it is? There are no wrong answers here. There are no wrong answers. My guy right there in the tie, he said that's organizational culture. He pointed to it. There are no wrong answers. Organizational culture is, some people, oh my gosh, it's the way we do things, right? It's the morals and the norms and who we are as an organization. It's a lot of times it's hard for people to kind of give a solid definition to organizational culture. If I ask you the question, I don't expect you to respond, but I will respond for you. It's more of a rhetorical question. If you had to use a metaphor to describe your organizational culture, what would you say? Would you say our culture is a team? And then what does a team look like? What if you said, well, our culture is a zoo? What does that look like? Our culture is a prison. Dysfunction is with the zoo and the prison. Or maybe you were saying our culture is dysfunctional. I'm not sure. Our culture is a machine. Our culture is a family, right? So when you think about organizational culture, there are metaphors that we use. My challenge to you, write this down if you don't mind. Go back to your organization and ask your colleagues, what metaphor do you use when you describe our organizational culture? That would be very telling to you as it relates to understanding your organizational culture. Again, we're talking about culture shift with a DEI lens, right? All this stuff is the organizational culture. As a matter of fact, the organizational culture is an entity, a living and breathing entity. It actually has taken on human characteristics. William, how is that so? Because it's made up of human beings. So it's made up of human beings and it becomes its own entity. Am I lying? When y'all walk into your organization, it has its own identity, right? Identity is part of how we begin to describe ourselves. So the organizational culture is made up of all this stuff. The people, the structures, the identities, values, beliefs, and behaviors. The management style, the leadership style. You have a leader, big leader. Then you have managers. There are two different leadership, management, two different styles. Organizational structure, the systems, the roles, processes and policies, the unwritten rules and norms. This is a good one. So when you get hired, HR says, well, this is what we're supposed to do. They give you the guidebook. When you go on the floor or in the field, your colleagues say, hey, man, we ain't doing that. This is what we're supposed to do right here. So it's the unwritten rules, and the unwritten rules are the ones that usually drives behavior and performance, not what you were told in HR. So when we're talking about how do we get to the organizational culture, or understanding organizational culture, we have to understand this. Check this out. When you all go back to your places of work, you're going to say, my goodness, we had a wonderful time at the Mercer Chamber of Commerce, Mercer Princeton Chamber of Commerce Diversity Conference. It was just so great. Let me put a pin in it for 1 second. How many of you are here with a colleague? If you raise your hand, you got a colleague that you're here with. Okay, that is wonderful. It's more than what I thought. Are you here with 2 or 3 colleagues? That's awesome. One more, 5 colleagues or so? Great, excellent. There's a reason why I'm saying this. Because usually what happens when we come to these types of activities, we as an individual are transformed. We feel good about what we have just gone through. Then we go back to the organization and we try to implement some of the stuff that we learned. And then what happens, we hit this brick wall. It's like, hold on now. Dr. Lewis just shared with us. I wrote it down. And I came back to the organization. Look, y'all, this is what we need to do right here. This is it. Y'all been asking for it. I went and got it. And guess what? Bam. What the bam you hit was the organizational culture. So when you're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, you cannot do that without shifting the culture. We're not talking about programs. Trainings. We're not talking about that. We're talking about shifting the culture so that the programs and the trainings can take. What usually happens is the organizational culture. I heard somebody was there, that's been around since 1860, 57 something. One of these organizations here. When you're around that long time, you tend to the organizational cultures tend to want to maintain the status quo. In order for organizations to be around for a long time, they cannot deal with a lot of change and rapid change. Not consistently. So what usually happens, the organizational culture wants to maintain the status quo. And so when you come back to the organization with some innovation, the organizational culture said, I don't want to hear what you got to say because I want to maintain this status quo. And so it usually takes a crisis moment in order for change to happen. When that crisis moment happens, bam, the organization goes to the next level of performance. And then the organization says, I don't like this, as I want stability, I want status quo. Then another crisis moment happens, bam. That's how we grow as organizations for the most part. Perhaps the biggest crisis moment that we've seen in recent history was the pandemic. The pandemic changed, it not only changed, but accelerated stuff that we have been thinking about 5, 10 years, 20 years ago that we wanted to do within our organizations, but we were too afraid to do them. The pandemic said, no, y'all gonna do it right now. You don't care about what you're afraid to do, you're doing this right now. And guess what? We did it, and now we're at a different level. Bam! Now we're trying to get back. People, I can't wait till we get back to the new normal. Can't wait till we get back to 2019. That's the organization culture talking, right? And some people are like, nah, we don't need to get back. I remember going through counseling, relationship counseling, and we're like, we want to get back to where we started. Counselor's like, nah, y'all want to get back to where you started. As a matter of fact, I said, I don't want to get back to where we started. I want to go to another level. So as we talk about getting back to where we started, no, we need to get to another level, right? And that is shifting the organization. Those of you all that have several of your colleagues with you, now you're in a better position to change the organizational culture because it's just not one person. What I say, diversity or belonging is everybody's responsibility, right? One person cannot change the organizational culture, even one person at the top, right? It takes a critical mass. If you did a bell curve, right, you got 10% of people right here are gonna say they are on it. Whatever it is that you want to do, they down with you. 10%, it don't matter what you say, they ain't doing it. 80% is right here, they're like, I'm a good person, I don't know. Our goal is to get this 80%, to get closer to that 10%. Critical mass means that we don't need 100%, we need about 25% of that 80. So now we got 35% of the population pushing the organizational culture. When you get 35% of the population pushing the organizational culture, now you're beginning to see just listen. Oh, they're talking about belonging. Or that new language, that diversity. More people are talking about diversity. More people are going to the seminars, the workshops. More people are looking at the organization and connecting in with friends. Because we got 35% of people pushing the organization. And we're not necessarily going to change it, we're going to bend it. We're going to bend it to the change that we're looking for. We're going to bend it towards more inclusion, more diversity. So that's why it's so important for us to start with organizational culture. This is the outcome. The outcome that we're looking for is for individuals to feel like raving fans of their organizations. When I'm a raving fan, I don't know about you all, but I love McDonald's French fries. And McDonald's is not paying me right now. They probably should. I probably need to not even talk about them until we get a contract. But anyway, I'm a raving fan of their French fries. I don't know. I've been eating McDonald's French fries, and I can't eat the burgers no more. I can't pass the burgers, but the French fries I can still deal with. So I go get me some McDonald's French fries, and I've been a fan of McDonald's French fries since, let's say I was 5. Right? I don't know, 5. So over 50 years, 40 to 45 years or so, I've liked McDonald's fries. My children likes McDonald's fries. My grandchildren are beginning to like McDonald's fries. That's 3 generations of people that likes McDonald's fries coming from my family. That is what you want in your organization. You want raving fans. How do you create raving fans? You create an organizational culture where people feel like they can reach their full potential. You create an organizational culture where people have the resources to reach their full potential. You create an organizational culture where people can show up being authentically themselves within the confines of your culture. Y'all got my caveat there? See, I want to show up authentically myself. I would have worn some shorts or something. That's not in the confines. So we got to do this within the confines, okay? So this whole notion of organizational culture is important. I said that the budget, this slide right here. Understand, organizational culture is so powerful that it will eat your strategy, your innovation, your diversity, your equity and inclusion stuff. It will eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That is how powerful the organizational culture is, okay? So we cannot do this work without understanding the impact of organizational culture. I want to introduce you to a framework. Michelle shared with you a framework this morning that kind of looked at diversity and inclusion. I want to introduce you to a framework that looks at what I call the culture of belonging. So, when we're thinking about this whole notion of organizational culture, first of all, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have to think about it in terms of the entire organization. There are 7 key drivers, and I use this with my clients that I work with. There are 7 key drivers for any organization. I don't care if you're a small business, not-for-profit, large big box business, government, no matter where you are. 7 key drivers: organizational values, leadership, employee experience, policies and practices, accountability, customer experience, and employer of choice. So, someone asked earlier today in terms of evaluation and measurement, what do we measure? How do we measure the return on investment? Well, we have said, our framework says, you know what? We're looking at the organization as the entity to be evaluated, not the individual. So when we're looking at the organization as the entity to be evaluated, Now we're looking at how diversity, equity, inclusion shows up in these 7 places, which are primary places for any organization. All of you in here have organizational values, right? All of you in here have leadership. Everybody in here has these 7, so this is key across any organization. So what we're saying, that if we're going to really look at shifting the organization and really commit it to DEIB, then what we have to do is we have to look at it through these 7 key drivers of an organization, of my organization. What are my organizational values? Our behaviors manifest through our values. Michelle shared with you the iceberg. That iceberg, think about values. That what we see at top is the manifestation of what's happening at the bottom. So the only way we can get to understand our organization is look at our values. Then we have to look at our leaders, directors, to everybody all throughout the organization. And somebody shared this with me, I love it. Do we have cultural humility? Not cultural competency, but cultural humility. Now I'm beginning to think about leading in an inclusive way. I'm having an inclusive mindset, if you will. Then to our employee experience, many of you may have employee experience engagement surveys, but what we're saying is this is not an engagement survey of the employees. We're saying, hey, how are the employees engaged? What are the resources they need to be successful? Then we look at our policies and our practices. Someone had asked a question with Michelle is, well, how do we look at policies and practices? She said you have to interrogate them. I'm paraphrasing. But that's basically it. We have to look at our policies and practices to make sure that we don't have any disparate impact. Then we have to look at accountability. We cannot have this work without accountability. What are those accountability measures for everybody within the organization? What is the customer experience? Check this out. Y'all know this. The employee experience and the customer experience are in a symbiotic relationship. They work hand in hand. If the employee is not having a great experience, who else is not having a great experience? The customer. Yeah. So I need to make sure my employees are having a great experience, because that is going to impact my customers. Those two experiences are like this. And then we want to be the employer of choice. I want people to come to me. I want people to come work with me. Come work for me. Come be a part of my team. And the only way I can do that is when my employees, God, man, y'all need to come work at the Mercer Community College. Whew, they got some good stuff going on. I don't know what it is. It's something in the water. I walk in there, everybody's saying hi. I just don't know. That's the culture. Or, I don't know, y'all probably don't want to come to that place. It's toxic. What are you talking about? This toxicity that's around and stuff you can't see. So how are people talking about the organization? That's what we have to look at there. So when we look at these 7 key factors, so my encouragement to you is go back and ask yourselves the question. Where does diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging show up in these 7 areas? Does it show up? And if it doesn't, can it show up? Should it show up? And I would submit to you that yes, it should show up across all 7 of these areas. Let's look at this slide right here. This slide right here says that it's a kind of a different way to look at the previous slide. But we're looking at leadership, accountability, institutional vision, communication, and values. Down below is have some higher education type of thoughts, because I am from higher education. But essentially, when we're talking about organizational culture, and when we shift that to behavior, organizational behavior, what we want to see is we want to see that our decision making and our leadership and decision making are being executed in an inclusive way. We want to make sure that our policies and our operations have shared decision making, collaboration, and coordination. We want to make sure accountability, we have our measurements and our award structures. People need to be awarded for work, and then for this work especially. And so do we have award structures for DEIB work? What does the budget look like? What does performance evaluations look like? What do our climate surveys look like? Institutional vision, our planning documents, our strategic planning, our long-range planning, capital campaigns. If you're in an academic space, your academic programs, your enrollment management plans, what do they look like if that's the space that you're in terms of institutional vision? Does diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging show up there? Our communication, how do we communicate? I was with a client, and this is a bank in Winston-Salem, and I walked in Winston-Salem, and we were in the boardroom, and there was an American flag and a picture of Martin Luther King Jr. That was a very powerful symbolism for me. And so I didn't get a chance to ask him, hey, what brought you this? I was talking to the president of the bank. What brought you to this right here? Help me to understand that. We didn't get a chance to ask that question, but it's the symbols and signs that speaks to people. Those are very important. And then our values and our beliefs, the narratives and the stories. What are the stories that you have about your organization? Do you have a mythology? Do you have somebody, something, some event that rallies people around in unison? And if you do, is DEIB connected to it? And if you don't, can you connect DEIB to it? Mythology is very, very important and very strong. Everything, how we communicate as human beings through stories. Stories are passed down from generation to generation. And as a matter of fact, the stories are within your organization. Let's not, it may not be a formal mythology, but 2 years at that Christmas party, y'all remember what happened. That's a story that is passed down. You know, they don't do this. They should. That's a story. So what are the stories that are being used? And how can you take the stories and shift them to help change your organizational culture? Y'all, I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts with you. My time is up for the formal presentation. I think we got about 15 minutes or so for questions and answers. So if you want to ask me a question, please do so, and let's go from there. Any questions?
So how does one differentiate like a group and a manager, department culture, and organizational culture?
Yes, there are multiple. So you have subcultures within the organization, right? So you have the big organizational culture, then you have subculture. So you ask that question. Ask the question at the top in terms of to your leaders. How do you describe our organization? And then go to your management divisions. How do you describe our organization? Or how do you describe your division, your department? How that manager describes their department may be different from manager to manager. And now you're beginning to see the subculture begin to formulate. Okay, these folks over here feel like they're a zoo. These folks over here said they're a family. These folks said they're a machine. These folks just want to leave. Okay, we got to fix this, right? And the reality is that you will have subcultures within organizations. The goal is as leaders, when we begin to put, here's something to write down to take home with you. I said at the top, put diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, whatever you want to call it, put it on your agenda. Put it on your agenda. You don't need to change no policy. You don't need to go into cabinet. You don't put it on the agenda wherever you are in the organization, your sphere of influence. Put it on the agenda, because what that does, that means we're talking about it every day. It's not. This is what usually happens. This is the organization, and this is diversity. So when something happens, we talk about diversity. What we need to do is do this. When we put on the agenda every day, it's there. Now we can talk about, hey, what's going on with belonging? What are you all doing? What's some of the activities you're doing with belonging? Or this, for the next 15 minutes, we're going to talk about this around belonging across our entire organization. How is it going? What's going on? Where are the pain points? Where do we need to dedicate some resources to? Who's doing a great job? So it's top of mind all the time. So that's how we begin to look at the big culture and the subcultures. Consistency within the message throughout the organization. Anybody else? I answered all your questions?
That was a phenomenal presentation, and I just want to comment.
Thank you.
I just want to comment on the organizational culture piece. At my employer, the New Jersey Department of Labor, we actually started putting in Pride Month, Hispanic Heritage Month signs in the elevators. And usage of those same signals, like those same signs in our email signature. And it's unique how we've had a lot of feedback from individuals within the organization that's saying, hey, we're prioritizing D&I. And I often say, well, it's not just about that way we're prioritizing, it's through our actions too. But I wanted to address what you said. That started to transform the organizational culture. Because people who weren't aligned with D&I started to see the organization is prioritizing this D&I just through representation.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a key component. And then, as you said, just training alone won't transform it, but then integrating some training in that as well to kind of lace that deliverable. So I just wanted to just comment on that. That goes a very long way, as well as pronoun usage and email signatures as well.
Absolutely. I appreciate your comment. What you're just really pointing out to us is that we don't need, sometimes we do need the big splash, but more times than not, we need those small increment, changing the combination, working at small increment levels. And I think sometimes people get frustrated with that because, and I get it, there's a sense of urgency and we need to change it right now. We need to blow it up and redo it. I get it, I understand that. But the organizational culture is not going to accept that. So what we have to do is we have to work very methodically. And where we can find places where we can bend a little bit, we're going to put that notice on the elevator, we're bending. You know, we're going to use pronouns, we're bending. You know, and we don't have to make a big announcement. We're just going to just do it. And people are going to say, okay, I don't like that, or I like that. Those that say I don't like it, cool, got you. You may want to find employment elsewhere, right? Those conversations we got to have. Yes.
Thank you again for your time today. My question is a bit of a sidebar from my day job. I am fortunate to instruct at a university online in a social work program, and working with students as they begin to see themselves, forming and shaping programs and organizations. And I do a bit of a lecture on cultural humility and a piece on institutional accountability. My question for you in the takeaway was what happens behind closed doors. Are you able to comment to specific strategies or maybe in your own experience where you have had to be, where you were part of those conversations in terms of holding folks accountable for those behaviors, statements behind closed doors specific to organizational development?
Yes. So here's the situation. I'm gonna have to really be careful so I don't out myself and out my organization that I'm talking about. So yeah, I'm gonna be a little guarded here. Here's the situation. I am on the board of one of our nonprofit organizations in my city, and when I got on the board, before getting on the board, we went through 18 months of training and development, brave conversations around race relations, and I led that as a consultant. After that experience, and I did that with the board, not the organization, just the board of the organization. So after that, it was like we had such a great time. Everybody's like, hey, we want you to be a part of the board. I was like, hey, I want to be a part of the board, so it happened. Right after it happened, the president calls me up and says, hey, I'm leaving, Will. I'm retiring. Can you be on the search committee? Sure, okay, cool, I can do that. So search committee, we meet, pretty diverse search committee, and we have a diverse pool of candidates, and the decision comes down to two candidates, a white woman and a black woman. And on a little bit more context, the first interview, when we interviewed everyone, it was through Zoom. The day of the interview, the black woman's technology went out, right? So she had to interview by phone. Everybody else interviewed by Zoom. Okay, but now she's already at a disadvantage. So we invite both of these ladies we had three people, but one person dropped out, so we invite both these ladies to the final interview. And everybody, including myself, already had in our heads who we were going to pick based on the previous interview. Right? But we want to be fair, and we're like, okay, we're going to try to have an open mind. I'm just being real. This is how these decisions are made, and we all come to the table with our preconceived conceptions. Okay? So, and the person that we're going to pick, myself included, is going to be the white person, the white lady. Not because she was white, it's just that she had a better interview, right, to me. But I was so glad that when the final interview came up, it was very competitive. So much so that when we left with the final interview completed, we were like, hey, let's just take a straw vote to see where we're going. And it was very close, about 5 percentage points, like on a scale of 1 to 10, what would you give? Okay, there was 5 percentage points between the two ladies. Well, that was actually nuanced because there were 2 African Americans on the board, 2 African American men, and 4 on this search committee, and 4 white folks. The decision was split around racial lines. So the 2 black men, myself included, voted for the black woman. 4 other white colleagues voted for the white woman. I am co-chair of the search committee. So when we leave, I see it. I'm also a diversity expert. I also work with this, but I'm trying to take a back seat just for a moment. I want to see what's about to happen. I don't want to be that guy, right? So I'll take a back seat. So the chair of the search committee calls me and says, hey, Will, let's talk. I said, okay. She said, did you just see what I saw? I said, I sure did. So we got to talk tomorrow, because we already had planned to talk and make our decision the following day. So now I'm writing a note, because I got some emotions going on and I'm trying to figure this thing out. So I said, so a lot of times when I got emotions, I write. So I can get the emotions out, I throw that away, then I rewrite it, and it's not as powerful, not as explosive with my emotions, right? So I'm writing out why I came to that decision, right? And I want everybody else to write theirs out as well. So we get fast forward, we get to the meeting. I'm already got my statement prepared, and so everybody goes around. And I say to my colleagues, I said, look, I can go with either one. Both of them are excellent. I can go with either one. However, the candidate that I chose had a little bit more oomph to her presentation, and she had more commitment, lived experience with the mission of the organization. And I believe that you can put her in front of any donor and they will see her commitment, and she will be able to do the things that we need her to do from a fundraising capacity. Both of them can do the work. It's just that pushed me just a little bit more for her. One of my colleagues was like, I made a statement yesterday. She said, the statement I made was, I feel more comfortable, it's a white colleague, white woman, I feel more comfortable, I think I can work better with the white candidate. She called her by name. Backed up, didn't say nothing. But then she came back the previous day, the next day, and said, hey, I realized my unconscious bias was working. So we have a banker, and so he says, okay, we're going to put this thing, we're not going to do the straw poll, we're going to put this thing on a Likert score and weighted score, and diversity was one of the issues, mission, commitment to the mission, commitment to diversity, not diversity of color, but commitment to diversity, and a couple of other areas. The decision came down to 1 point. The previous day was 5-point difference with the straw poll. When we began to really interrogate the message that I said to my colleagues, I said, look, I had to go back and look at our equity statement. And our equity statement said this. I had to reflect on the fact that you all spent 18 months with me in conversation around equity and inequitable practices and diversity and inclusion. We said as an organization that we want to eradicate inequities, and we want to give people an opportunity and give folks that space to grow and develop. Over the last 20 years, we've had a white male and a white female president of this organization. We right now have a singular opportunity as we go into the next 100 years of our organization to make a decision that will be transformative and also will manifest our core beliefs and values. That's what I said. One decision separated the folks. The African American woman is our new president.
Thank you for that.
Yep. I think that's my time, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, what a great presentation, everybody, right? One more round of applause for Dr. William.